Thank you, Senator Blackburn. I want to thank Chair Durbin and Ranking Member Graham for holding this hearing. There's no denying that we have a gun violence epidemic in the United States of America. When gun violence becomes the leading cause of death in America, or yet another small town becomes a household name because across the country because of another tragedy, we have a moral obligation to act. Just yesterday, I joined President Biden in Monterey Park, California, to meet with the community that's still grieving from a mass shooting that took the lives of 11 people at a dance studio on the eve of Lunar New Year. I was pleased to see President Biden announce his executive actions that will make our community safer and will save lives. But I think we all acknowledge, including the president, that these executive actions to address gun violence do not absolve us of our duty as legislators. Now, last Congress, this committee held 11 hearings on common sense steps to reduce gun violence. And we know that the overwhelming public support these measures have. But as we gather here today, just after America surpassed 100 mass shootings in this calendar year, that's 100 tragedies by the first week of March. And Americans are watching from home, asking, when will Congress step up and do something? So I'm committed to finding a path forward and look forward to working with whoever is willing on the other side of the aisle to end the epidemic of gun violence in our country. Now, my first question is for Mr. Lindley. As a program manager for Brady's Combating Crime Guns Initiative and as a former law enforcement officer, you've spent a good part of your career combating gun violence. The Brady Handgun Violence Prevention Act created a system requiring background checks for gun purchases from licensed dealers. And yesterday, President Biden announced a new executive order directing the Attorney General to ensure that gun dealers are following existing laws concerning background checks, highlighting the role gun dealers have in limiting the proliferation of guns in our communities. Are you concerned that the Bruin decision will lead to looser gun laws, and in particular surrounding the registration of firearms, and then undermine our efforts to improve safety?
Thank you for the question, Senator. Absolutely. Again, I'm not an attorney, so I can't see the future when it comes to legal issues.
That's okay. I'm not one either.
Okay. But if you look at some of the things that have been put into place, especially with the Brady background check process, it didn't go far enough back in the 90s. So we do have to look at universal background checks, something that California has put into place and has been very successful with. You also look at limiting, if not, outline new purchases of assault weapons and high-capacity magazines. Again, something that California has put in and has been successful over the years.
Thank you. And I don't mean to make light of the fact that you're not an attorney, nor am I. Trust me, we hear from a lot of attorneys in this committee. There's a lot of attorneys on the committee. But I do want to uplift your perspective with your law enforcement experience to this conversation. Now, as a former law enforcement officer, you've experienced the epidemic of gun violence firsthand. And I think you'd agree that the Monterey Park shooting was simply a high-profile example of the epidemic that we have in this country. I mean, in a span of 8 days surrounding that one incident, California experienced at least 2 more. In your opinion, what role does the availability of large capacity ammunition magazines and semi-automatic assault weapons play in the gun violence plaguing our nation?
Again, after almost 30 years in law enforcement, seen far too many victims, far too many mass shootings. And when you look at the lethality of semi-automatic weapons, especially assault weapons, coupled with the high-capacity magazines, it makes it very difficult for the victimology. If you look at how many people can be shot in that time frame with a 30-round magazine as compared to a 10-round magazine. And we've seen instances here in California that an individual who went in, did a mass shooting, but had a lower capacity magazine, had far fewer victims. But individuals usually have to wait until the person reloads until they engage and try and disarm the individual. A lot of different victims can take place between 10 rounds and 30 rounds. Or, let's say in Las Vegas, 50 or 100 rounds.
Thank you very much. I'd love to have some follow-up questions here, but at this point, I'll turn it over to Senator Blumenthal for his questions.
Thanks very much, Senator Padilla. Thank you all for being